What is up, all my aces? I hope you guys are having a great day. So a couple of weeks ago, that Austrian guy from the Military History Visualized channel, don't worry, he's not a cop, you don't have to run away, and me decided to have a quick chat about the air war during the Second World War, essentially. And we started recording the stuff to see where it essentially leads to. We had a pretty productive talk that lasted roughly an hour. With a lot of things being said and resaid and just chewed through. Both of us felt that this talk would actually be of interest to all of you. And as such, I've cut it down a little bit and you can just listen to it right here. Be sure to check out Military History Visualized at the end of this video. I will have an annotation taking the review directly to him. He will also have his own cut of this discussion on his channel, which might be a little bit different to me because we edit it independently, giving all of you essentially two versions that combined will probably amount to the scope of the whole discussion. Now, as always, once you've watched this video, if you enjoyed it, give me an iron cross via that thumbs up button, or don't, that's fair enough as well. Make sure to share this video with all your friends and people that might be interested by it, and wish all of you aces a great day, good hunting, and see you in the sky.
Something I'm very interested in is I read a few years ago a lot of stuff about Hans Ulrich Rudel, the famous German Stuka pilot that flew around 2,500 missions and supposedly killed more than 500 tanks. And a few years ago I read some articles that claimed, well, that's actually total bullshit, and the effectiveness of ground attackers in World War II was extremely low in terms of destroyed tanks. So what is your view on this topic?
It's interesting that you start with Rudel, because he's always yeah, but he's always taking as this kind of shining example of what a single person can supposedly do. And as a pilot who, like you said, apparently destroyed somewhere around 500 tanks. The rather peculiar aspect of that is that when his unit was previously sent off to the Mediterranean and Africa, he was not allowed to go with them because, as far as I know, the official reason was that he pretty much was considered to be a very bad pilot. So it's interesting how somebody like that, who is basically disregarded by his own unit, then goes around and suddenly kills 500 tanks. It's possible, of course, as a single person with the Ju-87. It is probably somewhat sketchy whether those 500 kills were actually done. However, there's no real actual way of proving it. You can go back into the archives, you can look at the kill numbers, at the kill confirmations and so on. But there is an extremely difficult aspect when it comes to actually confirming a kill. And what is a kill? That is the big question here. What is a kill? Mm-hmm. When an aircraft fires at a ground target, at a tank, for example, do we count a hit as a kill? Do we count the confirmation of other pilots or ground units that they saw this happen as a kill? Do we consider, for example, let's say Ju-87s attack a column of Soviet tanks. They have to withdraw. The wrecks are still on the battlefield, and somehow German troops get there, they inspect the damage, and they see, oh yeah, these things are knocked out. At that point you can say, all right, that's a kill. But if you don't really see the tank in front of you, the destruction that was apparently caused for it to be knocked out, you can never be 100% sure whether that tank was knocked out without looking at the country's archives that tank belonged to, and looking at their kind of statistics on this and this day, this and this hour we lost these many tanks to air attacks. And when you look at the testimonies of pilots of all nations, that's the Allies, the Axis powers, and so on, you'll find a lot of pilots say, I hit this tank, I destroyed this tank, and so on and so forth. And then you go back into the archives and you check the kill counts, the official kill counts that were recognized by the countries that supposedly had these losses, and you notice actually there's a big discrepancy here. And at that point, it's probably also a human psychological thing. When you attack a target and you have your crosshair dead center on it, you start firing, you see sparks, you see smoke, you see dust being blown up, you'll probably tell yourself that's a kill.
Yeah.
And then you fly over that tank, you look back as you swing around, and you see, for example, the crew bailing out, and they're running for their dear lives. At least that's what you think. They fling themselves into some kind of ditches and so on. And you say, well, yeah, that tank is knocked out, surely. And then you fly back to base, you check the gun camera footage, and it confirms the same kind of thing. You hit the tank, at least it looks like you hit the tank. You see the crew running away, you see the whole dust and impact. And you also have some of these videos on YouTube where you see these attacks made by Stukas and so on tanks, and you think, that tank is knocked out. But if you actually go back then, and let's say these ground attackers flew away, and the crew goes back to their tank and they look at it and it's like, oh yeah, they hit us, but this thing can still drive, or we can repair this within an hour or 2 hours or maybe a day. Is that a kill? Is it not a kill? There's a discrepancy here sometimes that you need to take into account when you look at these official kill counts that were given by all the nations. If you hit and destroy, that is of course a good thing in terms of saying this weapon was capable of doing that. But if you have per rocket a, let's say, 2% chance of destroying a target, and you fire off 8 rockets, how many of those are actually going to destroy it? And you have these moments where the units come back to the airfield and they say like, oh, we managed to kill so and so many tanks, and it in fact is true. But then 2 weeks later they had a whole series of missions where they fired off rockets and nothing ever really blew up. So with rockets and bombs, it's a very, very precise manner of destroying a target. It's not easy. It depends a lot on the skill of the pilot, a little bit of RNG, you might even say. And if you talk about bombs, for example, a 50 kilogram bomb, that's going to do fine against a truck, even if it explodes a couple of meters away from it. But against a tank, a 50 kilogram bomb exploding 10 meters from a tank is not going to do a lot. Yeah. At least against, at least a medium tank. Light tanks, it might shake the crew up. I mean, the crew is probably going to get a blast, yes.
Yeah, the crew is problematic.
Yeah. With the modern kind of research that has been done, seems to be confirming and really agreeing on one point, and that is that air kills or ground kills by aircraft are vastly exaggerated from the Second World War.
Yeah, it's the same like with the air-to-air kills. I have some statistics read recently from what bomber crews claimed shot down German airplanes, and their, I think, by factor 10 increased. So they shot down like 100 fighters. And the same goes with sometimes the ground attackers claim numbers were like, yeah, we destroyed 100 tanks. Yeah, well, the division you attacked only had 70 tanks at this moment.
Yeah, that actually happens a lot, especially what you said with the bomber formations. It's quite often, and you see this again on all sides of the front lines, that bomber crews somehow shot down more airplanes than actually attacked them. And that is again one of those psychological things. You're starting to shoot as a bomber gunner, you're starting to shoot at an incoming aircraft, or you're supporting the aircraft, your bomber buddy that is being attacked. And suddenly you have maybe 10 gunners shooting at a single aircraft. Suddenly that aircraft gets hit, you see smoke coming out, maybe it's even burning, you see the pilot bailing out. You're always going to think that was me.
Yeah, of course.
And you're going to go back and you're going to claim that kill. And it's also a question of keeping morale up. It's also a question of keeping the home front morale up. So you're just going to say, okay, you know what? We have apparently 50 aircraft kills here in a bomber formation of 300 bombers. Yeah, that's probably possible. Whether that is actually the truth, that these kills were actually real, or whether they were imagined, or a simple multiplication of what actually occurred, is entirely different. But that goes back to what we said earlier. What is a kill? If you drop a bomb next to a tank, the tank might be fine, the crew might be completely dead, or at least dazed or they might have suffered some kind of
Russian?
yeah, concussion or
Injury.
exactly when they're wounded or concussed, for example. Would you class that as a kill? Is that a tank kill? The overall effect of ground attackers on the psychological effect of ground attackers on the soldiers on the receiving end, that is something that is hardly ever discussed, but it's really, really important. If you look at the early war example, the Battle of France, and also to some degree in Africa, before the Germans were beaten back, the Allies were, at least the soldiers, were extremely annoyed by the fact that wherever they looked up in the sky, well, this is an exaggeration, of course, but whenever they looked up, they would see a German aircraft. If it's a Bf-110 or if it's a Stuka just loitering around, something that is waiting for something to pop up. And if you have a flight of Stukas just loitering along the front lines, waiting for a radio call saying, this and this city, we're attacking it right now, we need air support, you just fly there, you're there in 10 minutes, you see the targets on the ground, you see a couple of, I'm making stuff up now, but a couple of B1 bis or whatever they were called, you just attack them. And the French didn't have that. So they were always on the receiving end, and there's a lot of things once again being said about the Jericho siren. That thing is extremely annoying or fear-inducing the first or second time you hear it. After the third or fourth, it actually helps you because you're going to get bombed. Better get cover, But the psychological effect of those attacks, being on the receiving end day in, day out of an enemy air force that has air superiority, that gnaws something. And then there's virtual attrition coming in, and at the same time there's real attrition, because every air attack has the chance of destroying some of your equipment faster than you can probably repair it. And this is especially true of the Germans, who had big logistical problems, especially on the Eastern Front, where finding the equipment and the repair capacity of their units was, as far as I know at least, somewhat suboptimal, let's say.
Yeah, to put it very nicely. What exactly you mean with a virtual attrition?
Virtual attrition is basically, it's a concept. It's inducing a state of mind in the enemy that he is unable to do certain things because of a perceived superiority that you have. That's as best as I can essentially explain it. For example, let's say you are being beaten back and you're trying to organize a counterattack, but the enemy seems to be always one step ahead because he has, let's say, air recons up the whole time, and every time you try to make a move, he hits you with an air attack. At that point in time, you of course need to find a way to reduce the chances of these air attacks, and that means, for example, relocating your operational activities into the night, so you can't fully use the capacity that you could have because of this kind of mindset that you're in. You're always being harassed, you're always being attacked in the areas or during the times that you'd like to do certain things.
Okay, yeah, that's actually a very interesting point, because now you give me a name for something I read a while ago. During the Poland campaign, the German had air supremacy, and this allowed them to use some of their transport equipment for logistics to actually transport combat troops to the front line, because they didn't have to waste time on camouflaging their logistics. So they had more time and could use certain trucks to transport, I think it was an infantry regiment, into Warsaw.
Yeah.
They couldn't do this later on because it was completely impossible.
Well, there's also this one testimony that I read about a British soldier who was in Africa, and he was listening to the radio, which is quite funny actually, where there's this kind of broadcast from the BBC saying our allied boys in Africa are enjoying air superiority, the RAF is doing everything it can, and he looks up into the sky and he sees this German aircraft just scouting out the front lines, directing artillery fire. And at that point, he knows if he moves and if he gets into his truck and drives away, he's probably going to get hit as well. So, that is also a point in time where you can say the aircraft itself is not actually doing anything, offensively speaking, but its mere presence is inducing a state of mind in the enemy that is essentially a paralysis.
Yeah.
And that is once again, like I said when we started talking about the specific part, something that a lot of people don't mention in these discussions, and it's always focused around kills, and there's where that national bias sometimes pops in. Our pilots made more kills, or no, actually we did more kills, and so on. And it's very important at that point that you look at what your own Air Force, for example, claims, what the enemy recognizes, and the truth is probably somewhere in between. Although I must say, I find it, when you look at the really official stuff that goes in the army, where they recognize their own kills, not the stuff that is sent to the public, but their own combat reports saying on this and this day we lost 3 tanks to air attacks and so on, you can usually believe that.
Yeah. The losses in this case, they're usually and the other stuff.
But yeah, that is essentially a small, concise way of kind of explaining what ground attackers are. You can also go, of course, talk about the specific aircrafts which were good in what role and so on. But overall, that is the kind of picture that you can draw yourself, and especially when you read a lot of books and so on, that is, I think, the natural conclusion you come to is that a lot of the official stuff is nonsense. A lot of the kill counts are questionable, and you really need to look at the complete picture in order to understand what ground attackers were able to do in World War II and what they were not able to do.
Yeah, I mean, one final part about the psychological effect. I mean, it's actually not that surprising that it's mostly about the kill ratios and not about the psychological effects. Because I think this is kind of, I always say boys and their toys. Military history is mainly something men do, and it's always about numbers. We love numbers, we love statistics, and well, we are not so good with feelings. This kind of is, I think, reflected in that we usually don't talk about the psychological effects of these attacks. But actually, I read today that I think in the divisional reports, those air attacks were usually always noted to be a major effect on this, and I think it's just something that the soldiers were very aware of this, but usually it doesn't get reported because some people think maybe it's not interesting, or it's also kill counts and the actual tanks and planes are usually more interesting than that people. We shit our pants basically when other planes came around because it doesn't make for a good hero story.
Well, for a lot of the soldiers, it's also business as usual, getting air attacked. So for them, always going on about it. The thing is, as scary as it is, and as scared as you are in that moment when it happens, if it happens 5 or 6 times to you know what to do.
Yeah, it gets normal.
Yeah, you run into a ditch, you jump into a cover, and you just wait the 2 minutes and you pray to God or whatever you like to pray to, that so nothing hits you.